Hey guys, welcome to another INFJ Ramble. Today's recording is going to touch on being more assertive. But before we can get into that, we need to understand that, um, yes, we have communication issues. We have the tendency to use passive aggressive tactics, but that doesn't work. It just creates more conflict and more disconnect. And because we are, predominantly striving for harmony, I think harmony should start within yourself first. And if you think about it, like passive aggressive tendencies come because we have conflict within ourselves, that we are unable to communicate because we are not assertive, because we are afraid of rejection, we are afraid of conflict. But then we're creating conflict within ourselves, and it is not being said, but it is obviously being felt. Um, I think you can agree with me, like when somebody has an issue with you, but they're not speaking it, you can feel the tension in the air, and we apply that tactic, and it is not effective at all. Okay, so we're striving towards harmony, but we create conflict inadvertently, and it just kind of emanates out of us in a passive aggressive tone. So how do we resolve this? I've been kind of stewing on this subject for a couple of months, just because I'm trying to understand the dynamics between like interacting with people. And yeah, you have all these different personalities and perspectives and points of views and motives and agendas. How do you get everyone to collaborate collectively instead of always like be in a state of confliction? So how do you do that? And the answer is communicate effectively and assertively. And what we have to remember, like why we're afraid of communicating, first thing is we've never been taught. Um, I've learned that, we have the ability to feel a spectrum of emotions, a spectrum of feelings, and they show up as messengers to kind of nudge you towards the right, like, action or response. And a lot of times we just don't know how to utilize like the messages that these messengers send us. So a lot of times, because we don't know how to communicate, we have a tendency to kind of like hold these things inside, and it kind of like festers and it becomes toxic. And because we're not communicating it, a lot of this poison can pretty much circulate within our bodies, emotionally, mentally, physical bodies. It could circulate in them for potentially years, right? Because we don't want to speak up. We don't know how to speak up. And the reason why we are afraid of speaking up is, number one, we we haven't been taught, and we haven't been taught to like honor our emotions and also how to communicate them in a way that is effective. We haven't been taught that. The second reason is because we fear rejection, and we are afraid that if we speak up and say how we really feel and ask for what we really need, we are afraid of rejection. Um, the third reason is because it was on the top of my head and I lost it. There's a third reason. We don't like conflict because we don't like rejection. Oh, and boundaries. So a lot of times we don't set boundaries because we don't know who we are, and we don't know what we should accept and not accept, tolerate and not tolerate, because we haven't really, really thought about it, because we've been too busy trying to please everyone else in order to create harmony, so that we don't have to communicate our feelings, so that we can, yeah. But, it's the ultimate rejection of self. And the popular analogy I like to use is, for most of my life, I allowed people to use me as their emotional punching bag. It's a type of abuse. So if somebody is constantly punching you in your face, like this is a really extreme example. If somebody is constantly punching you in your face, is that okay? It's not. So, it took me years to figure this out, and it took me years to have the courage to step up and say something. And it's funny, when I first did it, it was the scariest thing in the world. Scariest, to actually speak up and say something. And yeah, I lost people, I lost people, but those people were meant to be lost, because if they can't honor my request, to stop using me as an emotional punching bag, or to stop taking from me and to the point of exhaustion, to stop, if they can't accept the fact that they need to stop parasiting off of me, um, then they're probably not meant to be in my life anymore. And is it really a loss or is it a gain? You have to ask yourself, like, some people that are currently in your life aren't treating you well, and it's because you're not speaking up. And if you do speak up, if they have an issue with that and they exit your experience, then their loss is your gain. That's all I have to say about that. Um, yeah, so I just feel like, we're afraid of rejection, we're afraid of conflict, we don't know how to communicate, we don't know how to be assertive, because we've lost ourselves for most of our lives trying to please everyone, trying to harmonize all situations to the detriment of ourselves, because we haven't been taking care of ourselves. We've been busy taking care of everyone else. And the hardest thing is to take care of yourself. Think about it. The hardest thing is to take care of yourself. It's very easy to take care of someone else. INFJs, we've been doing it for most of our life. I mean, we've been the caretakers and the caregivers and, the healers, and we've been giving and giving. And I feel like it is um, there's certain like steps that you need to go through in order to realize that that is not effective. It's not it's not an effective way to be in this world. You know what I mean? I had to, like I said, like, sound like a broken record, but I had to get to a point of exhaustion before I realized that, okay, this isn't working for me, and how do I adjust myself, and what do I need to adjust? You know what I mean? To become more of who I really am. Because for most of our lives, we haven't been who we are. We've been trying to be someone else in order to appease others, right? So it took a lot of like soul searching and soul digging. And, luckily, like I said, I had a platform to work with, because I did practice meditation, and, I've done practices for like self analyzation and things like that. So I had some tools to work with to really excavate the layers that I have built up around myself and self in order to, you know, really see who I really am. So it takes a lot of like self-reflection, like, what do you want? What do you need? How do you think you deserve to be treated? What do you think you deserve in life, and kind of proceeding from there. If you encounter people who are like mistreating you, and you will know by the way it feels. Like, I've been around people and it feels horrible, and I'm just like, okay, something is not in alignment, something is off kilter, and it needs to be addressed. Whether I assertively communicate my needs and my boundaries, or I actually leave, or they leave my experience, either way, this needs to be resolved. I've been with people where I feel nothing but love and care, and there is no conflict, there is no confusion. And I feel like that is a healthy interaction. When there is no pressure, when, there's a lot of trust, a lot of like love, a lot of like reciprocation, and it's like effortless and natural, I think that is a healthy relationship. And a lot of times we've allowed ourselves to participate in unhealthy situations. And like I said, by the way it feels, and you need to take appropriate steps to being more assertive. Now, I notice, like, for me, like, I can recognize if somebody is overstepping a boundary because I'll feel something inside, whether it be anxiety or anger or some kind of tension. That's where triggers come in. Triggers come in because something is happening to you that isn't in alignment with who you are. And you need to adjust yourself, or you need to address the situation so that you can bring things back into alignment. And yes, sometimes people will leave your experience, and that is part of the process. You can't like feel guilty about it. I mean, we're all chemical, I want to say we're all like chemical components, and some chemicals mesh well, some chemicals are very reactive, some chemicals just kind of like, you know, um, just don't mix. So that's, if you want to look at it that way, that's how people are when they interact. It's all like chemical, chemistry. You know what I mean? Is there chemistry or no chemistry? And it's not personal. It's you know what I mean? It's highly impersonal. But if somebody is being like highly acidic and highly um, toxic, then they need to be flushed out of your experience. And that's why purging comes. I can tie all these different topics together. They're all so interconnected. But anyhow, yeah, so if you are trying to be more assertive in communication, it's the hardest thing ever. I know when I first started, I was deathly afraid, and I would get like really reactive responses and repercussions. And I could have stopped there, but I was just like, no, I feel like I was being mistreated, and I need to stand up and say something. And I feel like anything, like the more you practice it, the better you get at it, and next thing you know, you'll it'll be like second nature to you, and then people will, respect you the way you deserve to be respected, and treat you the way you deserve to be treated. And anybody else that doesn't will be will probably exit your experience, pretty much. And if you have attachment to that person, then that just causes more suffering. If you feel guilt, that causes more suffering. If you have expectations, that create suffering. And that's why a lot of times, like I say, like, like I'm currently like I've been currently practicing non-attachment. It's not personal. You know what I mean? And yeah, some people are meant to journey along with you for an extended period of time, and some people are just meant to touch and go, and that's just what it is. You know what I mean? Um, what else was I gonna say? Oh, when you are practicing being assertive in your communication style, always keep in mind, like, you want to do it from a place of calmness, and you probably want to be very aware of your tone. If you can approach someone with a calm tone and a calm mannerism, and talk to them like this, then they're more apt to not put up any defense mechanisms, and they're more likely to listen to what you have to say and honor what you have to say. And if they don't, then, like I said, their loss, your gain. Because you don't really need people like that in your life. Um, like, it's funny. So, I know, like, I don't want to go into too much details, but in the past, in previous circumstances, I would confront people, and they became highly volatile, and then they would project guilt on me. And obviously, I was interacting with a narcissist, so thank you for the lesson. But those people are no longer in my life, and I just feel so much better. In my current circumstance, I've simply, literally, I've approached people like this, and very non-combative, very non-confrontational, and I've literally like just said, "Hey, do you think we could step outside for 5 minutes and just talk?" And a lot of times they'll be like, most people be like, "Oh yeah, let's go out and talk." And then I'll tell them, I'm like, "Hey, I've noticed like this has been going on, and you know I want to understand, and how can we make it better, and what are your thoughts?" And then we'll just have like a really like active communication um, about the situation, and usually it resolves itself, and if it doesn't, that's okay too. At least I was able to communicate myself effectively, and I was assertive. um, what else? Yeah, but holding things inside creates conflict. So you're trying to avoid conflict, but you're actually creating conflict inside. And people can feel that. People can feel that, and if, I don't know, I just feel like you need to say something, and when you build up the courage to do that, it will be so liberating. I mean, you may not be at that point yet, and that's okay too. I know it's hard, and I know it's very scary, but once you take the first step, and then the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, you'll start running with it, and it'll be, like I said, like second nature. And a lot of your interactions will be more harmonious. Yeah, and it's as simple as just having a conversation, just like this. Oh yeah, so sometimes when I tell people, "Hey, can we like step outside and talk for like 5 minutes?" Um, some of them will automatically go, "Oh, did I do something wrong?" And a lot of times I'm like, "No, you didn't do anything wrong. There's just a couple of things I wanted to talk about. That's all." And so I just kind of like calm them down, make sure that they feel safe. And so when we go out and talk, they're receptive, and they don't have any defense mechanisms up. And we can have like a really, really nice conversation. There's times where I've encountered people who, again, are afraid of conflict and don't know how to communicate themselves. And, ask them, "Hey, how are you?" Obviously something is wrong. And they'll be like, "Oh, I'm good, I'm good." I'm like, "No, like, how are you really? Like, how are you?" And then, usually when I do that, they'll just kind of like drop their guards, and they'll be like, "Oh, okay, this has been bothering me." But I think it has to do a lot with your approach, your tone. Speaking in a very calm demeanor puts people at ease, and then also just kind of like actively listening and actively talking. I notice like a lot of communication issues stem from it being one-sided, where one person is just constantly trying to like talk and like throw their or impose their power on you, but there's no active listening on their part. That doesn't work. That just keeps the other person down, and also keeps their defense mechanism up as well. So a lot of times I feel like an equal amount of active listening and active talking is necessary in order for you to resolve anything. But like I said, it's as simple as, "Hey, can we talk about," or "Hey, can we talk for 5 minutes?" There's another situation where I had a coworker that obviously, was had an issue of some sort. And again, I approached them. I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And this person, like, did the whole like, "Oh yeah, everything's good." You know, you know, just kind of like being overly optimistic, like extreme. And I looked at them. I said, "Hey, let's just have a very human conversation." And I know it's really easy to just be like everything's okay, but I can sense something is obviously on your mind, so let's talk about it. And once I said that, the person dropped their guard, and then we talked openly for about 15, 20 minutes, and afterwards we both felt really good because a lot of confusion was kind of like clarified. And I just think it's really healing when you have someone who is genuine and sincere in their communication, and they're genuinely and sincerely interested in understanding your point of view, and helping to build upon that. So that was my really long video on being assertive. If you learned something, that's great. If you didn't, that's great too. If you have comments, please leave below. I would love to hear them, and I hope you're having a beautiful day. Blessings to one and all. Amen.